Hi, my name is Gerard Daché, Executive Director of the Government Blockchain Association. Glad to have you guys with us this evening. We've got Nabil Malik, who's going to be presenting along with me. And we're going to talk this evening about the geopolitical impact of cryptocurrency. Before we get started, I do want to thank our sponsors, Brock Pierce, for providing this beautiful place, and Carla Ballard of Ying. Ying is it's a skill sharing community. So she's got an app and all that. And we were just talking a few minutes ago about some power networking things. So getting Ying involved in something like that would be a great thing to do. The GBA does host chapter meetings. So we do meetings like this all around the world, and just super glad to have you. I would like to also introduce Nabil Malik. Nabil Malik and I have been friends for a long time. He is an absolute genius when it comes to cryptocurrencies, and he's got a business called Cryptolitics. Tell him just a little bit about Cryptolitics and what your background knowledge is about this whole subject that we're covering.
Sure, absolutely. I got involved in cryptocurrency about 8 years ago. I ordered a Bitmain miner from China in 2018, which was super scary. All they took was Bitcoin, no receipt. So I hoped to God that I would get something in the mail. And then 3 months later it came. We grew it to about a 2,000 co-location facility hosting about 1,500 miners, and we had about 1,000 of our own. And then we sold the business because mining has become very enterprise level. When I started mining, you can make money with one miner in your basement, but that's no longer true. You have the Riots and the Maras that are multi-billion-dollar companies that go to states like Wyoming and Nebraska and sign up for 100 megawatts of energy at 2 cents a kilowatt per hour. At home, you're usually paying anywhere from 6 to 8 cents kilowatt per hour. But anyways, we sold that, and then I started a small little crypto hedge fund for the normal person. I saw a big problem in the industry. Everybody focuses on the $100 million guy. Nobody wants to help the person that's interested, that wants to invest 5, 10, 20K and learn cryptocurrency. So that's what we do right now.
Then Cryptolitics, the news and information.
Yep, and then also I run a blog and news. We're constantly posting, teaching clients. Me and Gerard have been running the longest active crypto meetup in DC. We started, 2017, I think? Yeah, somewhere around then. So we've been, outside of COVID, we are pretty consistent every month. Yep.
Right. Super. And we just went through our announcements, and last month we did a session on healthcare. If you go to the gbaglobal.org YouTube channel, you can watch Heather's presentation on personal healthcare data economy. It was absolutely amazing. So by all means, go to YouTube, search for a Government Blockchain Association, and you'll see it. We also talked about the upcoming meetings that we're going to do and the topics. Our next conference is going to be in May of 2023 in Washington, D.C., called The Future of Money, Governance, and the Law. And we're looking forward to see you guys there. Our big major initiative is a blockchain maturity model. Just in the instance of time, I'm not going to go into that right now. All right, so the talk tonight is the geopolitical impact of cryptocurrency adoption. And I'll hold the mic whenever you want to say something, just let me know. So if we take that word geopolitical and we break it down, right, we got geo, which is geography, right, and political is really all about power. And when we talk about cryptocurrency, there's an old saying that money is power. And one of the things that we're going to talk a little bit about this evening, and we're going to have a conversation about, so if any of you guys want to share some thoughts, by all means, raise your hands, and Allison will throw the mic at you, is how is this adoption of this new thing essentially impacting that? And here's the first couple of thoughts. Power, political power, legal power is based on jurisdiction. It's based on territory and territorial boundaries, right? So now this cryptocurrency thing comes in that is not geographically bound. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Yeah. And one of the so with regard to that, we were going to talk about the sovereignty of money. So up until recent times, nation states essentially was sovereign in the money space. But is that changing? Jiminy crickets, right? So you got central banks essentially that are supposed to be independent from the nation states, right? But affiliated, which then essentially that goes into the banking system. So those banks are regulated by the central bank, and it has all allowed for a very coherent monetary policy. So you have fiscal policy and monetary policy, right? But now what we're starting to see is financial institutions coming into play. And one of the things we want to talk about with power is information, right? Gosh, there's so many directions we want to go into, right? So you got power, money, information. It's all related, right? And then now you have fintech companies, which is now controlling that information and that access, right? All the way down to communities that are issuing tokens and coins, now all the way down to individuals. So the very concept of the power paradigm is fractionalizing, right? Jordan, if I take it over to the, all right, so here, I'll let you share your thoughts on that.
Yeah, let's talk deeper about fractionalization, right, and money in general. Before Bitcoin, money was always controlled by a central bank or a government of a country. They issued currency based on, before 1970, I think 6, it was based on their gold reserves. After that, it was based on the trust in the country or their reserve or their power or their military might or whatever it might be. But once Bitcoin was introduced, anybody could go out there and buy one miner and start producing a currency. So mining on a very, very elementary level is you are generating income via computing power. And before Bitcoin, now you guys, each one of you can buy a Bitcoin miner and start creating Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum out of your home's electricity with a $2,500 machine. That was impossible before Bitcoin. What can you do with that money? That is money that you generated through your computer power and electricity, and now you can send it to anybody in the world without a bank or government getting involved.
Can I jump in there for a second? So Bitcoin initially began to scare folks in government. Well, initially they ignored it because it was very small, right? As it started to grow, it became a little bit of a concern. But the thing that kept governments from getting overly concerned is its volatility. Because what the two things was its volatility, right, and its scalability. So folks in governments were aware of it, not overly concerned because of the volatility and scalability. But then what happened, right? Ethereum came out, a couple others. And if you look at this, if you look at the screen, what you now see is there are thousands of cryptocurrencies and tokens, you know, utility tokens, all this stuff. And so now anybody, essentially, these are all different economic ecosystems. So when the government first started thinking about, well, how do we monitor and control Bitcoin? No, well, Bitcoin is pseudo-anonymous and we can use certain tools and things like that. So we have a handle on it. But now what's happening is the entire concept of money is fractionalizing to the degree that governments are going to have an increasingly difficult time trying to monitor, influence, and control. Right? Yeah.
And let me tell you guys how everything connects back, say, to the US dollar, right? You can create a cryptocurrency through Cogent law firms' legal system today, right? Your next step would be to have a pairing system landing on an exchange, right? Once you land on an exchange, most people, 98% of people, will buy your cryptocurrency through Bitcoin. So the pairing has to be there, right? So let's just talk about hops, right? The hop would be from US dollar to Bitcoin, Bitcoin to your currency. You gotta have that pair or your currency has no value, right? Most currencies, the way they get any true value in the marketplace is by pairing to Bitcoin or Ethereum. Hence, you can sell the Bitcoin, go back to your local currency if you need to or want to. You can talk about this one.
Yeah. So where are we with respect to governments, right? So the International Monetary Fund, right? And it's funny, Christine Lagarde, who heads this up, she's been in a lot of different places on this, right? Saying cryptocurrency is not money, it's not, it's not anything to worry about, it'll never scale. Well, now they're in a different place. And the IMF and the US Department of Treasury are both in the same place where they're saying, this has grown to 1% of global assets under management, which is still a very small percent, 1%. But how long did it take the world to get to where it is now, right? Thousands of years to develop the global economic system. And literally in 10 years, roughly, right, it's grown to 1%. And the rate at which it's growing is faster and faster, right? And they're saying that this potentially threatens the fractional reserve banking system, right? Now, why is that important? The way the U.S. government works, and many other countries that have fiat governments, is they spend money without actually having it. And they get the money in generally one of three ways. They'll either tax it, right? They will print it, or they'll borrow it, right? Well, in terms of how big, how much the printing is, when COVID hit, we decided, hey, we need to send everybody home, but people still need to get checks. The total U.S. economy was $4 trillion. In March of 2020, the total U.S. economy was $4 trillion. In the next 1 year, we printed 14 trillion additional dollars, right? So that when people talk about inflation now, and people were talking about the election, and if this person wins, inflation will go up or down. It didn't matter who won the election, because you dump $14 trillion into a $4 trillion economy, and you're going to have inflation. It doesn't matter who the president is. Who's got the mic? You got the mic.
I have the mic. Yeah. I think the U.S. economy is $21 trillion. That's the annual GDP.
It is now.
No. I mean, it wasn't 21 trillion in 2020. It was probably 19
Not the
trillion.
GDP, the total supply of money.
Oh, money supply.
Yeah,
okay.
the money supply. The money supply went from 4 trillion to 18 trillion in a single year. And it's probably, the money supply is now at about 21 trillion, I think is what the numbers are now. So the entire banking system is worried or concerned. And the thing that has them the most worried right now is not Bitcoin, because they've kind of put Bitcoin on hold as, it's not something we're only worried about because of the technology and the stability thing. But Christine Lagarde said those challenges are temporary. So even the banks are recognizing that those challenges that cause them not to worry about it now will eventually be solved, right? The price of Bitcoin, along with other cryptocurrencies, will at some point normalize. It's been fairly normalized now, I think, for the last year, right? Right? At some point, it will normalize. If water finds its level, and the technology, along with there are technologies like the Lightning Network and other things that will extend that. But it's the sheer volume of the cryptocurrency ecosystems that have folks in the banking system worried. And the thing that worries them the most right now is stablecoins. Did you want to say anything about that, or you want to just keep rolling?
Yeah, I'll tell you guys a little fun story. I have a friend whose older brother went to college with the vice president of the Bank of Pakistan. We had a 3-hour meeting with him talking about launching Pakistan's first cryptocurrency exchange, funded liquidity provided by Charles with Cardano. And he goes, Nabil, look, I'm going to tell you this off the record. After the 3-hour meeting, he's like, I own Bitcoin. I own Ethereum. 30% of this country owns cryptocurrency. Pakistan is top 10 in adoption right now. But he's like, we cannot launch or make a legal exchange in Pakistan because if somebody moves $10 million, transfers it in Bitcoin, sends it overseas, we have no way to catch it. So I say, so what's the other side of this story? I say the other side is people are VPNing, right, into Binance, sending money to Binance through a Western Union. Binance is making money from your citizens while you guys, as the State Bank of Pakistan, can be collecting that extra revenue. He's like, I know, it's true, and I agree with you. And I own Bitcoin, I own Ethereum. But he's like, my government will not allow us to launch a legal exchange because they don't want money to be moving out. He's like, when you send 1 million rupees, or say 100 million rupees, or $1 million right now through a banking system, he's like, the State Bank of Pakistan has complete control over that transaction. They can deny it if they want to. He's like, if we open the exchange, we cannot deny any transaction or have control over it.
So the,
I have a question.
sure. Sure.
Hi.
This is
Yeah,
a
yeah,
closed
okay.
yeah.
I've got a visualization here on an infographic
Yeah.
that shows in pictures how much cryptocurrency was in 2020, and it exceeds the total amount of silver in the world. And if you wanted to just put that up there for a second.
Let's put it in the show notes. So give it to Jordan at the end of the evening, and we'll, because I don't have any way to put it up there.
Here, I'll just give it to him now.
Oh. But, yeah, we don't have a way, we don't have a technologically a way to do that. But, yeah, but we're going to circle back around to that because I think that that's a really important point. So governments, they use money to monitor, influence, and control. Get you in just one sec. Hang tight. And so monitoring, influence, and control is what Nabil was just talking about in terms of the visibility, right? But the other thing, so governments need to be able to see what people are doing, right? And then they need to be able to influence, generally through laws or taxes or stuff like that. I want to circle back to this slide, but we're kind of off topic. So let me let you go ahead and hit it, and then I'll come back to the topic of the slide.
I have a question for Nabil. You know, when you were talking about moving money out of Pakistan, the first thing that came into my mind was, well, yeah, they're going to say no because there's no way to do suspicious activity reporting. I mean, anytime you get so we have a client that's raising money right now, and you know, a lot of their investors are overseas, and every single wire transfer gets flagged because of the volume, and it's coming from overseas and what have you. So, you know, I'm sure that is the unspoken message, right, from the Pakistan of government. So how do you answer that? How do you address suspicious activity reporting within blockchain?
You can still do it, right? Every address is still connected to the blockchain. The only thing you can't do is stop it, right? You can monitor it, you just can't stop it. But what I was trying to tell the State Bank of Pakistan was, it's already happening, right? People are using Binance all over the country. You guys are top 10 countries in the world in adoption, right? So it's already happening. You guys should make it legal, tax it, and generate another stream of revenue.
Okay. What we're finding is happening is, you know when you go to an airport and they say, if you're carrying more than $10,000 in cash, please declare it, right? The government's ability to monitor is eroding, right? We're going to talk about the countries and what they're doing. And so there's an old saying, I don't remember if I heard this from you or somebody else, maybe it was somebody. You can take your country out of Bitcoin, but you can't take Bitcoin out of your country, right? You can make it illegal, you can shut down all the innovation, you can do all those things, but the people are still going to do it, right? And yeah, go ahead.
There was a moment in DC not too long ago, I think 8 years ago, when I used to meet people locally in DC at a Starbucks. I would take $4,000 cash, take my laptop, they would bring their laptop, and we do an exchange. I'm talking about the time before Coinbase. This is called peer-to-peer. I think the website still exists. It's called peer-to-peer Bitcoin. And all you would do is meet somebody at a local Starbucks, take 2 laptops, he would transfer the Bitcoin to your wallet, and you would pay him cash. And this used to happen, and it still does, in DC all the time. This can happen in any city, anytime, anywhere in the world, right?
So anyway, there's 2 sides of the coin, right? And the governments are very, very aware of this, right? Suspicious activity reporting is a key component of that. is a requirement of banks. So for somebody to have a banking license, a banking charter to become a money services business, there's an entire legal regime infrastructure, right? This is how governments do it. They do it through these entities. Now what's happening is those structures are being smashed, and you got small businesses all around the world, and so the governments are going to have to rely on other ways to do this. Yeah, Tom.
Well, you know, how much of Bitcoin that is traded in the U.S. goes through, say, Coinbase? I mean, I generally don't know.
Like 70% right now?
So, in other words, we've just substituted one trusted intermediary for another, it seems like.
Well, I think Allison had,
Well, I would say at
well,
least the fiat.
give her the mic.
Oh, I was just saying fiat into crypto.
It's the rails, right?
Yeah.
But once you're on the rails of cryptocurrency, a lot of people try not to go back to Coinbase.
And what's happening right now, the next regulatory war you're going to see, or I shouldn't call it a war, issue, is AML KYC on wallets, and which wallets will be allowed to be used. Because they may make it a crime, they're talking about making it a crime to send money to a wallet that doesn't have AML KYC attached to it, right? So what you have to know and expect is that the regulators are coming. They believe that if the government doesn't have the ability to monitor, then bad actors will do nefarious things, and they're right.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the core concerns that governments have about crypto, is that it's going to be used to finance bad guys or used for money laundering.
The U.S. dollar is used to pay for 98% of all drug trade in the world. You eliminate the U.S. dollar, right? That argument doesn't make sense to me when people say that, right?
Well, but you can't, there's limits of the ability. I mean, look, it's one thing to go in person, and there are challenges with doing business in cash, and there are risks to that.
You should ask El Chapo that, right? Right? I mean,
Okay.
I mean, I don't even have that much to say. I just wanted to say, like, the only reason that there's an issue is because it can't be controlled by people that are able to control most other things. And this country has a real big, I feel like that's my business problem, especially the people that are in charge of everything or of most things. And so this is one of the few things that they're not allowed to have their opinion be heard. And as usual, when powers that be opinions are not heard, they throw temper tantrums. And so that's a lot of what we see in crypto and in all of these regulations that are moving to happen now. Because I think in the next couple of years, if we're not careful, it's just going to translate into the same monetary system that we have now in a lot of regards. And that's what I keep hearing. I keep getting worried about every time I come to these meetings or go to a conference or listen to Bloomberg. I'm like, damn, are we just doing the same thing with headsets on now? Because it sounds like it, and it sounds like for just as many people who want to keep things decentralized, the people who do want to have say-so are now recognizing the financial impact or the gain that they could have, and they're like, well, let me take my friends over so we can make our rules and we can do it our way. You know what I mean? It's like they weren't invited to the sandbox, and now they're seeing how much fun everybody's having, and they're like, we want to come over. We have our own buckets, we have our own shovels, we only build these kind of castles. So that's all.
Yeah, very well said. Okay, listen, I want to divert the topic a little bit because Nabil shared some information with me as we were coming up the stairs. And let me just cover this one thing first, and then I want to move on to the conversation about Kanye, right? Yeah. So we were headed here. I don't know how we got off topic. This is talking about global reserve currency. So we talked. The problem is when a nation has a global reserve currency and they can print as much as they want, they end up printing too much. It devalues their currency, and that's generally not a problem if there are no suitable alternatives, right? And so what are the suitable alternatives today, right? You know, the Chinese yuan, right? The euro, right? They're all, especially coming out of COVID, they all did the same thing, right? Is cryptocurrency a suitable alternative today? Not yet, not totally, but it's getting there, right? More and more there are apps that make it more usable, right? Legal and regulatory frameworks are getting cleared up. There's more and more folks are starting to adopt it, right? It's getting there. Every global reserve currency has been a global reserve currency for about 100 years. The U.S. has been a global currency for about 110 years. And there is now something coming on the horizon, and people are looking for alternatives. I was on a phone call with a bunch of folks from Pakistan, and they talked about, I forgot, it was sort of like the economic imperialism of the U.S. And what they're saying is, you print all this money, and since I think 65% of the global reserves are in U.S. dollars, you make 65% of the world poor when you print money to give to your citizens. And they don't like that, right? They say, hey, that's not fair. But when you look at El Salvador or some of these other countries going to Bitcoin, they're still having their problems, right? That's not a nirvana either. That's what I'm saying. It's not totally there yet. But people don't like the status quo. They're looking for alternatives, and the crypto community are building those solutions. Did you want to say anything before I? You hold it about this far away.
Okay. Maybe somebody else can flesh out what I'm about to say here, but if you can go back to the prior slide there, what does it mean to be a global reserve currency? And I think we have to bring into this discussion just a little bit of history into the Camp David Accords that made oil, it forced the sale of oil worldwide. It must be purchased in US dollars, and that's how the US got its spot as the global reserve currency.
That's a perfect segue into something that I think Nabil was about to tell. So let's hold on the Kanye thing. Let's go to the Russia thing. Yeah. All right, because that's a perfect segue. And I'll throw this slide up here.
So like, it amazes me to see that Bitcoin is being discussed right now on international war talks and sanctions, right? So currently, Russia I think Russia's banking system just released news that they will accept cryptocurrency, especially Bitcoin, for their energy and oil to get away from the sanctions that the West put on them, right? That's one country. Iran is doing the same thing. Iran just had news the other day saying that you can pay us for our oil or energy or wheat or whatever they're producing in cryptocurrency. So they're fighting against the international SWIFT monetary system with cryptocurrency. And
let me share a couple of.
yeah,
So I'm in communication with folks in Russia, right? And part of a business community there. And we all know what's happened in Russia, right? They've lost access to the SWIFT network. They've all moved to stablecoins. So they're all doing business in stablecoins. So, this talk is about the geopolitical impact of cryptocurrency. But the opposite side of this is the geopolitical impact of cryptocurrency adoption. But the opposite side is cryptocurrency adoption is impacted by geopolitical factors, right? It's a two-way street. So the very fact that Russia was essentially sanctioned by the West, right, has now driven people towards cryptocurrency, primarily in the area of stablecoins, so that business transactions can happen unaltered. Remember the scene from Star Wars, right? Princess Leia says to Darth Vader, the more you tighten your clutch, the more we slip through your fingers. So the more attempt there is at control, right, the more effort there is in avoidance, which is a big reason why GBA has our event called the Future of Money Governance and the Law. Because we believe that the future of money needs to be about really sound governance as opposed to government. Yes. Right? What we need is rules, not rulers. Right? And Lord Acton said it, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And look, I served in the military. I love the United States of America. I mean, I've been willing to die for it, right? But I also recognize that the concentration of power is not good for any country, the United States included. So we need oversight. We need to come up with mechanisms that provide fair, equitable governance, so that nobody is more important than the rules. Yeah, you can.
So if one of the use cases of cryptocurrency, like Bitcoin, a non-stable coin, is that you're protected against inflation because there's a fixed amount, a fixed supply. And one of the concerns about fiat currency is that it can be devalued, and it arguably has been devalued with the inflation we're seeing. Don't you run it? I mean, if a stable coin's got to be stable to something, and it's my understanding they're usually stable to the dollar. So it seems to me that a stable coin, it addresses one of the problems, one of the, I guess, it addresses the issue about you can do peer-to-peer, you don't have the trusted intermediaries, but it doesn't address, it's still tied to the dollar, and if the dollar's devaluated.
The solution was never a stable coin, right? The solution, mathematical solution to the 2008 crisis was Bitcoin.
Right, but if it's stable coins are in other words, if the growth is among stable coins.
It isn't though, right?
But I thought that was just.
But you gotta understand.
Currently.
Yeah.
In fact, so what's happening right now, first of all, there are different types of stable coins, right? There's algorithmic based, there's asset-backed, there's basket of assets, right? And so you have to look at this whole thing as a movie, not a photograph. So there's so many stories I'd like to tell you. What we need stable coins to be stable to are prices, right? Prices for a basket of goods. So if the stable coin is stable to $1 and the dollar is losing value, then I wouldn't call that stable coin stable because it's like I told the police officer, I can draw a straight line if you let, no, I said, I can walk a straight line if you let me draw it, right? And a stable coin to an asset like the dollar is almost like a self-licking ice cream cone.
You understand stable coins are launched. Most stable coins in the market right now, including USDC right now, are all launched by the same people that control the dollar and the currencies. USDC is backed by Coinbase. Coinbase is funded by BlackRock. BlackRock's chairman and board, most of them sit on the Federal Reserve. So, right, you can repackage the dollar and call it CD, a stable coin, but that doesn't give it the characteristics of a true cryptocurrency, right? It isn't decentralized. Yeah.
Hey, listen, we got to talk about, no, this is super important. This is great. We'll let Don make his comment, but then I want to talk about, as it comes to power, right, geopolitical power, global power, and its value, its relationship with information and dissent, right? So.
Well, that's a great lead-in to my comment. So in the world of the relationships that take place between people and their elected officials, governments, what have you, the social cohesion of that relationship appears to be breaking down before our very eyes. The trust in government stats that Pew puts out every year, they're at historical lows. And so there are a lot of actions going on that basically start to have people question the government's right of surveillance for their financial activities. We kind of went down a road because of some specific events that happened on the global stage with the Know Your Customer, the anti-money laundering, I forget the proper name for the Anti-Terrorist Act.
Patriot Act.
Well, but right, the Patriot Act in the U.S., but worldwide banks have to abide by those resources or by those regulations because the social norm was that's okay, I'm gaining more from the protection than I'm losing from the privacy. I think as that balance comes under more scrutiny, we may go back to a population or a citizenry that won't accept the type of surveillance, which is the primary issue around the Bitcoin currencies, in my opinion.
I want to tee this up for you, right? That's classic. I couldn't agree with you anymore. what I'm going to propose to you tonight is that the government structures that historically we have understood, believed in, our paradigm in terms of who the rulers really are, right? Are they the people that sit in the elected offices, or is it some other? Is the paradigm of power shifting, right? And with that, let me turn it over to Nabil to talk about the incredible value of information, because you're talking about the social cohesion. Where do we get our social cohesion from, right? It's from these things, right? It's from the information that we get fed, right? How are we governed, right? Are we governed by a government entity, or are we being governed by algorithms, right? What is it that, I said governments monitor, influence, and control. Well, are they doing it through the traditional banking system in ways that they've been monitoring in the past, or is it being done through this stuff, right? And I would contend that maybe our very concept of the paradigms of power need to essentially get updated based on the technology. Nabil?
Right. Well, I think for a long time, we have understood that corporations have a very large role in the economics of the country, beyond the three arms of government, the executive branch, the legislative branch, and of course, the Supreme Court, their branch. And now we're seeing the Googles and the Facebooks, and what we are fed is very different. I've got a couple of friends who they voted much differently than I do, and they've got a different set of information. And so I see what you're saying, I see where you're going. And at the same time, there is some talk that the Web3 layer will then cut some of the corporations out. Talk.
Hopefully. Let's talk about the matrix switch. Let's talk about the matrix switch, which I think is completely real. So recently, Kanye West got banned, right? So he didn't break a law. Legally, he never broke a law of the US government. He said some things on social media. Facebook banned him, Instagram banned him, right? Just for saying the things that he said. On top of that, JP Morgan closed his account that has $140 million in it, and he asked them why, and they said, we're a private bank. We don't need to give you an answer. You have 30 days to move this money, or you'll lose it.
Nabil, that's not accurate. That's not true.
What rule did he break?
No, he had previously gotten into a fight with JP Morgan because Jamie Dimon wouldn't return his call. And he told them he was moving his money out of this. It's been documented.
Everybody's mad at Kanye based on what he just said. Forget that.
No, listen, it already, no. The JP Morgan thing had nothing to do with.
The issues that he's having right now because of the anti-Semitic marks he made are why.
But it's a coincidence.
That has nothing to do. It's, no. It is, no, wait.
Let's not do that. Because I don't want
You don't have the mic, so they can't hear you on the recording. No,
listen.
guys, pause for a second. Let's
Well,
pause for
I
a
just think
second.
this is important to be factually accurate.
I
This
agree,
is not
Tom,
why.
I agree with you.
Okay.
I agree with you.
I mean,
Well, hold on a second.
I will happily send around documentation to support
Yeah,
this.
Tom,
I'm just making,
absolutely.
because I don't think we don't want misinformation.
right, agreed. Let me shift the, let me shift to this, to a recent example that we just saw at our last conference, right? So, as we all know, during the last presidential election, it was a little contentious, and President Trump was banned from some social media platforms, right? He then opted to go to Parler, which essentially was known as a free speech, right? And then Amazon and AWS essentially, I don't remember which one. It was one, I think it was AWS, right? They basically deplatformed him there, right? Because they didn't like what he was saying. They deplatformed Parler, right? So the reality is that there are very powerful technology organizations that have a tremendous amount of influence in what happened. So specifically about whether his comments were related to that, I don't think is the main point. I mean, we do need to be accurate, 100% agree. But the reality is that the measures of influence and control, right, in many ways are not in the political elected officials. In fact, I would say that if you're a political elected official and you make certain statements or don't make certain statements, you could potentially be deplatformed by those kinds of organizations. So there is.
I think that's 100% true. I think that's also always been true, and I think what's happened is we're going through a process about what will get you deplatformed is rapidly changing. In the 1950s, if you were a communist, you got deplatformed.
Right.
John Lennon said during the 1960s at one point that the Beatles were more popular than Jesus Christ. That temporarily got the Beatles canceled. And, I mean, my point is, this has always been an issue, and it used to be liberals who complained about it. People on the left complained about it because they talked about corporations were stifled, and there's still people that argue, like Noam Chomsky, manufacturing consent. Now, and conservatives used to argue, hey, that's a free market, voting with your dollars. Now it's flipped. I mean, everybody, it's the same. This has always been an issue. It just, it's a different Moors that will get you canceled now.
I think you're right, but I think the issue is the.
I mean, I don't think it's good.
Right.
I mean, I'm not defending this. I'm just saying that we should recognize that this is not a new thing.
I agree.
Speed with which sanctions can be imposed and the thoroughness with which sanctions can be enforced are different.
Yeah.
Well, just two comments. The speed with which sanctions are available and take place is much more rapid today.
Tom, I disagree with you though, right? Say the time of the Beatles in 1950s, they didn't cancel their bank account, right? They didn't cancel their merchant services, right? When you get banned from Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram now, the next companies that ban you are your merchant services. They cut off the way you make money. The banks will unbank you, right? So they cut off how you earn and hold your money. I think the impact is a lot more severe than it was for canceling one show of the Beatles or a concert.
Well, I mean,
Right?
anyway, look, I know you guys want to move on, so
There's a big
I
difference
just
in
question
those two.
how many times, I mean, it's one thing to get cut off by Facebook or Twitter. It's another, I agree with you, it's an order of magnitude greater, but to get cut off by banks, PayPal, et cetera. But I don't know how many people have really been cut off by the banking system and PayPal and all that. But anyway, you guys got to keep going.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, yeah. No, the real issue that.
And the ability, you've got 10 countries on the board. Let's talk about China for a minute with their social credit system. When you're denied travel, when you're denied the ability to have medical care, when you're denied the ability to earn an income, those sanctions are available in almost real time based on the enforcement of things that have virtual currencies, whether they're crypto or not, or the ability to, cut your access to your own assets.
Yeah,
And
I think.
so the devastation that can take place with the sanction on the political opposition or whatever, like you say, I mean, McCarthy's a great example. There was deplatforming in the 50s. There'll be deplatforming 20 years from now. But let's hope that it's, somewhat consistent with the cultural values of the society.
Yeah. And listen, with that, let me just say this one thing, and then we are going to have to wrap it up. Mustafa, I will give you a word after this.
All right.
So and again, this was really intended to be a discussion, so we didn't really have a point. It's just we've kind of gone there together as a group. But one of the things that we've ended with tonight, I think, is the trouble and the problem. One of the things that I'd like to hit next month when we get together is what is the solution, where do we go? How can we affect this in some positive way, even if it's in a small way, right? And I don't know what the answer is, maybe when we're done recording, if you guys want to talk about it, but.
Can we do one in a circle, like one potential one for the record, just so we can get going?
Sure. Let me let Mustafa, because I promised he was going to say something, and then we'll just let folks have just a parting comment. But here's the deal. I promised them that we would be out of here on time, so we'll just have to make it quick. No, we'll just make it quick. Mustafa, go.
Yeah, just the one thing I'll say, supporting Nabil, and to your point, and I'm not sure 100% about the banking side of it, but, employers, if you're banned on Instagram and Facebook, and because that's the first thing they do when you're looking at hiring someone, you're going to go and check their social media profiles out. And if somebody is banned on Instagram or Facebook, they're not getting that job because that's clearly a big red flag. So while, to your point, I'm not stating anything about banks or anything whatsoever because I really don't know what the numbers are. But at the same time, that the impact of that cancel culture is 100% real.
Yeah. Anybody else want to say anything?
I'm sorry.
Oh, so we said what the solutions were, right? So I just wanted to springboard that effort. I think that maybe one thing that we can do is as centralization is, as the federal government is moving closer to crypto, and then there's this backlash from the people that have been involved for a long time, as people that are we know enough to translate and to bring these concepts from a really high level to a really low level. So I think that one way that we can invite more people to join us on this journey is to be really open about the information we have so that they don't lean towards more of the government regulated side just because they're willing to make the trade-off of security versus privacy. But the other part of crypto is there's so much that no one talks about. It's like a secret society. If we're more open about sharing the information and make it more common knowledge, then maybe people will be less afraid to join the movement, so to speak.
Anybody else have parting thoughts or comments before we wrap it up?
Sorry, just a final comment.
Yeah.
I think something that we touched on is that control was around currency at first, but now we've got these cell phones that everybody's attached to. So I believe that it's moving to a technology basis. Like we also touched on, it's what you're fed. So TikTok or Reels or different things feeding you subliminal information. It makes you buy things over time or make certain actions. So I think that that's probably the way that regulatory powers may go eventually. That's the way I foresee it.
Right.
I think that just right now there's a strong regulatory presence in the most important industries, whether it's banking or real estate. And I'm more focused on real estate and making sure that we leverage that asset to help free people's minds and their finances, because everything we're talking about is conceptual, but the real reality is based on physical real estate and mental real estate. And so being able to empower people to have more ownership of those two spaces, everything else will fall into place, because as we're pointing out, we don't own Instagram or Facebook, but if you do own your own physical space and your own mental space, and you have a space to invite people into your reality and create technologies of solutions. So there's much more opportunity from that standpoint.
Amen. Yeah.
Just to build on your point about building your own reality, I'm a firm believer. Like I said earlier, I host a lot of hackathons and conferences, and my whole thing is if people don't have exposure on how to build these things, you just simply subject to the same government coming in and building it and creating their own infrastructure. So my point is we need to expose, if we're talking about solutions, a new generation has to be able to build this reality, basically. We need to expose them, give them resources so they know how to build in Web3, know how to build different solutions, and think outside of this current box that we're in, because we're all boxed in. We grew up in it, So somebody who's 9 or 10 knows how to code, they can go in and create this, and in 25 years, we're looking at something different. So my point is, for a solution, we need to build the next generation and give them resources so that, everybody's not playing sports, they're building Web3.
Right. Anybody else? Final thoughts? I would like to, as soon as you're done, I just want to make one quick announcement, then we'll wrap up.
So in terms of solutions, that's kind of what I've been working on at my work, and what I talked with Heather about at the last meeting here was, consent-based data markets. That's not a term I coined, but it's a market. The idea of consent-based data marketplaces is simply that as long as everyone consents to it, they set the rules. It's a system of rules without rulers, and you can participate or not participate. You can choose to exit. So I think that's heading in that direction of a potential solution.
Excellent. Don, you got to throw one.
I think that's an excellent point about rules. I think what gets people upset is when the rules are changed either arbitrarily, capriciously, or with an ulterior motive that they don't agree with. So there's a change process that has to take place for the rules to be accepted and considered valid, I believe.
All right, with that, listen, I'm sorry, I got to wrap it up. We can stay for a few minutes when we're done with the recording. But I want to thank you all for participating. Before we wrap it up, I do want to have a special thank you to three folks, right? Again, to Brock Pierce for providing this lovely place, for Carla Ballard, who worked with us, and Ying, actually for Eric Guthrie and Better Me, Better We for being an organizational member. And I would be totally remiss if I did not thank Kathy Dashe, the advanced director.